Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. We've had a few minor technical issues this morning, but the Lord has blessed us with being back online. So if you are joining us from home, welcome. We are delighted to have you with us this morning, even though the camera's still moving around here. We're delighted to have you with us, and if you're here in the classroom, welcome. We're delighted to have you with us. The Lord is blessing us today. It's a beautiful day here in Fort Wayne. We hope it's a beautiful day wherever you are. So, this morning we are in Revelation class number 32, and we're going to be studying, we're in chapter 13. We're going to finish chapter 13 today, and it's chapter 13, verses 11 through 18. And this is the story of the second beast, the beast from the land. Most people call him the false prophet. You'll see that name, but that name never actually appears in the Bible, but that's the name most people give him. But he's a person we've never seen before, so we're going to get to see him today for the first time. And so just first of all, where we've been over the last 2 weeks has led us up to where we are today. 2 weeks ago, we saw that Satan was battling God with a big war in heaven. Satan, for the last however many thousand years that he's been around, 6,000 years that he's been around, has been primarily working down here on earth, being able to get into people's hearts and being able to get them to get sinful and be sinful. That's been his primary venue. But on occasion, as we saw back in the book of Job, Satan's been able to go up to heaven, up to the throne room of God, and actually go in front of God and discuss things with him and argue with him and accuse people of their sins right in front of God. And I'm sure that was pretty tedious for God to have to sit there over thousands of years and have Satan come in periodically and accuse people of their sins. But it is what was going on, and the book of Job tells us that. We also saw that in some other places in the Bible. And God changed all that at the midpoint in the tribulation. We saw that 2 weeks ago, and it's really the central thing that happened at the midpoint of the tribulation is God changed the relationship with Satan that he had to a different relationship. And it's a relationship that he will have now for the last 3.5 years of the tribulation period. So 2 weeks ago we saw what's called the war in heaven, where Michael the archangel led the angels and basically at God's direction, they threw Satan out of heaven and threw him back down to the earth. And at this point he was banned from heaven forever. So he is gone from heaven, never to return. So at that point, he was restricted to earth. He had no ability to go back. And, as I said, the earth had always kind of been Satan's domain, but now it was his only place. It was where he had to spend all of his time. So he started to think, all right, what am I going to do now to use this as effectively as I can? And he decided, as we saw last week, to indwell the Antichrist. Now, the Antichrist had been in the process during this first half of the tribulation, during this period, this 3.5 years here. The Antichrist had been in the process of conquering the world, of destroying the other kings of the world who were in charge of other places. And the Antichrist was consolidating his power during that 3.5 year period. By the time we get to this midpoint that we're at now, the Antichrist is almost completely in charge of the earth. So Satan decides to indwell the Antichrist. And last week we saw the scene by the sea where Satan brings up this monster, this evil, evil monster, this evil beast from the sea, and indwells the Antichrist with this beast. And that evil monster is really Satan himself, is indwelling the Antichrist. And that's the monster with the 7 heads and the crowns and the horns and all that stuff that we've seen and that I tried to draw up here once. So at this point, Satan is now indwelling the Antichrist. He's fully committed to be on earth for the rest of the 3.5 years. He's on earth. And he's making the decision to just try to bring as much evil to the world as he possibly can during these last 3.5 years. And we're going to see we're going to see some more things about how he's going to do that. We're going to start with that today. Now, bear in mind that when Satan indwelt the Antichrist. The Antichrist had a fatal sword wound on his head. So the Antichrist was dead. It was fatal. It was a fatal wound. The Antichrist was dead. And we saw a couple of weeks ago that God gave Satan the power to resurrect him when he did this. So Satan resurrected the Antichrist and put himself, Satan, inside of him. That's the whole scene that we saw last week. Satan is now inside the resurrected body of the Antichrist. So it looks like the Antichrist with a big head wound from the outside, but really it's Satan who's inside of there and who's really driving things down here on earth now. And he's now completely in charge of the earth for the next 3.5 years. And that combination of the Antichrist of Satan indwelling the Antichrist's body is called the beast of the sea, or the beast from the sea. So this week's lesson is really the next to last lesson from the midpoint. We have one more lesson next week from the midpoint that we'll look at. But this week's lesson, we're almost at the end of the midpoint. And we're now going to meet a second character, also called the Beast. And it's a new person we've never met before. He's never, to my knowledge, he appears nowhere else in the Bible other than these closing chapters of Revelation. If anybody can find him, I'd love to know where that is. I have looked and have not found him. I did find a reference in Joel chapter 2, where Joel chapter 2 says, they divided the land of Israel in half, talking about the Antichrist. So perhaps he's part of the they in there, or maybe the they is the Antichrist and the other 10 kings. I'm not sure who the they in Joel chapter 2 is supposed to be, but that's the only one I was ever able to find that actually shows, that possibly might show this person someplace else in the Bible. So we're going to start doing that, but first let me read the scripture for you today. This is today's scripture. And again, this is Revelation 13, verses 11 through 18. This is John speaking. Then I saw a second beast coming up out of the earth. Remember, the first one came out of the sea, right? It had 2 horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. It exercised all the authority of the first beast on its behalf, and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. And it performed great signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to the earth in full view of the people. Because of the signs it was given power to perform on behalf of the first beast, it deceived the inhabitants of the earth. It ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast, who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. The second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666. So lots of stuff in there. We're meeting a new character this morning, as I said. This new character comes up out of the land. The first beast came up out of the sea. He was kind of like Leviathan, the great beast of the sea. This beast comes up out of the land. Satan is bringing him up just as he brought the first beast into this world. So Satan is now bringing a new beast into the world. Interestingly enough, as I said, Satan's bringing him forth out of the earth. Now, let's take a look at what that means, because one of the first questions is, who is this beast? If the first beast was Satan himself indwelling the Antichrist, who is this new beast that's going to indwell this new person? So let's take a look. Let's go back to Revelation 9, and I'm gonna take a look at the opening of Revelation 9, and we see a similar beast coming up from the land, or a group of similar beasts coming up from the land. Let me read this to you. The fifth, this is one of the trumpet judgments now. The fifth angel sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from the sky to the earth. Remember, a fallen star is a fallen angel, a demon. The star was given the key to the shaft of the abyss. Remember, the abyss is in the earth. It's down in the earth. When he opened the abyss, smoke rose from it like smoke from a gigantic furnace. The sun and sky were darkened by the smoke from the abyss, and out of the smoke locusts came down upon the earth and were given the power like that of scorpions of the earth. They were told not to harm the grass of the earth or any plant or tree, but only those people who did not have the seal of God on their foreheads. They were not given power to kill them, but only to torture them for 5 months. And the agony they suffered was like that of a sting of a scorpion when it strikes a man. During those days, men will seek death, but will not find it. They will long to die, but death will elude them. Then it goes on to describe the locusts. It said the locusts looked like horses prepared for battle. On their heads they wore something like crowns of gold, and their faces resembled human faces. Their hair was like women's hair, and their teeth was like lions' teeth. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the thundering of many horses and chariots rushing into battle. They had tails and stings like scorpions, and in their tails they had power to torment people for 5 months. They had as king over them the angel of the abyss, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon and in Greek Apollyon. So these are demons coming up out of the abyss, coming up out of the earth. So demons are under the earth, is what we learned here in the Bible, and demons come up out of the earth. So this new beast that Satan is bringing up, he's bringing up out of the earth. So this is not Satan himself like the first one. This is a demon of some kind. We don't know exactly who this demon is. By the way, I love that part of I don't love, but I think that part of chapter 9 is the best description you're ever going to find of a demon in the Bible. If you ever want to find a description of a demon, it's what I just read to you. That's what a demon looks like, with the tail of a scorpion that can sting you, and they're like locusts. They just go everywhere, and all that stuff that we just read. So that's a great description of a demon. So it appears as though this new beast that's being brought up out of the earth is a demon. Well, what do you do when you bring a demon up? The same thing you did with the first beast. You're going to have to indwell someone. So this demon, by the way, will actually look like a lamb, right? It's going to have 2 little horns, and it's going to look like a cute little lamb that's walking around in the pasture. We all think, yeah, we all think lambs are innocent and cute. And speaking of innocent and cute, we had a horse baby born in our family this week. So we are parents of a grand pony, and this is just the cutest thing in the world. So having seen that, I can imagine the cuteness of this lamb walking around. By the way, if you want to see pictures, Devin, I have pictures of the horse baby. It was born Thursday morning. So, at any rate, this is a cute little lamb, and he looks like a lamb, but when he opens his mouth, he sounds like a dragon, right? Evil words come out of his mouth. He sounds like a dragon, is what it says. Let me read that to you again. It had 2 horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. That's what we read earlier. So it's looks nice. It looks really innocent, but it's really evil inside. And it's evil inside because it has a demon inside. So, Satan has raised this person up, and Satan has raised it up to be his spokesman. Actually, his spokesman, the spokesman of the Antichrist is what it says. But remember, Satan is inside the Antichrist. They are the beast. Together, Satan and the Antichrist are the beast. So this is the spokesman for the beast, the first beast. This is the second beast. I hope I'm not confusing you with all this. If I am, tell me and I'll say that differently. But this is a second beast, and he is now the spokesman for the first beast, which is the Antichrist indwelt by Satan. He appears to be a prophet. when you listen to what he's saying, to what the scriptures tell us he's saying, he sounds like a prophet, right? So he's designed to look like a prophet. He also has some of the powers that prophets have. We see that, and as I said, many of the people who write about this stuff actually have a name for him. They call him the false prophet. That name doesn't appear anywhere in Scripture, so I'm not going to officially call him the false prophet. Technically, he is the beast from the land, or the beast of the land. But many people call him the false prophet because his job is to be a prophet for the Antichrist, to be out there convincing people and converting people to follow the Antichrist. That's his job. So where did he come from? Well, we don't know exactly. The Bible doesn't tell us. It doesn't tell us where the human being that's being indwelt here comes from. But presumably he was a follower of the Antichrist during the first half, the first 3.5 years of the tribulation, presumably. Somebody that the Antichrist trusted, somebody that the Antichrist indoctrinated, somebody who was also ruthless and evil. And Satan has now selected him to be indwelt by some sort of demon. And we don't know what demon. There are lots of demons out there. But some sort of demon is now indwelling this guy. And that demon came up out of the land and is now indwelling this person, just as the Antichrist himself is indwelt by Satan. So we have two beasts now that exist here in the world now at the midpoint. One indwelt by Satan himself is the beast from the sea, and the other indwelt by a demon is the beast of the land. So what does this guy do? He's essentially the Antichrist's sidekick, is the word I use. I grew up in an era where all the heroes on TV had sidekicks. I remember the Lone Ranger having Tonto. I remember Batman having Robin. I remember Poncho, or Cisco Kid having Poncho. Those of you that are really old might remember that one. But you know, all the Saturday morning shows that I used to watch as a kid, the hero always had a sidekick. And that's kind of what we have here. We have a sidekick. So I think of him as a sidekick. And the sidekick's job is to tend to the hero, tend to his needs, help him, give him support, be there for him, all that kind of stuff. Help him when he needs help. It says John tells us in verse 12 that this beast exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence. Now that seems to imply that he only has power, that first of all, he gets his power from Satan, who's inside the first beast. And he has to be in the presence of the first beast. He has to be in the presence of Satan in order to exercise his powers. We're going to talk about his powers in a few minutes, but he has cool powers. He can call down fire from heaven. He has some cool powers that he can do. But he only seems to be able to do them when he's near, very close to the first beast, very close to Satan himself. And I want to be clear, Satan is not like God. Satan is not omnipresent. He's not somebody who can just be everywhere at once, all at the same time, like God is. If we want God in our heart, he's there. If you want God in your heart or in your heart, he's there. God can be present everywhere. Satan can't. Satan is only present where he is. And right now, he's going to be in the Antichrist for the next 3.5 years. He's going to be in the beast. So Satan can't give this guy powers unless he's near the beast, unless he's near the Antichrist. And that's an important piece here. Got a little ahead of myself here for a moment. So this guy's job is to accompany the Antichrist, the beast, who's the Antichrist indwelt by Satan, to accompany him and to perform miraculous signs by Satan's power. His mission, as I said, is to get people to worship the Antichrist, to worship him as God. And he has miraculous displays. He can bring fire down from the sky. And these miraculous displays will be seen by people in the world as being further proof that the Antichrist really is God. And in verse 13, we start seeing these powers. The first one we see is the power to call down fire from heaven. Now, and this new beast, this false prophet, has the ability to call down fire from heaven. Now, those of you who've looked at the scriptures realize that that's happened once before, and it happened back in 1 Kings chapter 18, verses 16 through 40. And since we have a couple minutes, I'll read that to you. This is the story of Elijah on Mount Carmel. By the way, Deb and I have been to the spot on Mount Carmel where Elijah did this, and we saw the altar, Elijah's altar up there. Cool place, very, very cool place, right? It's almost like it's one of the highest points in Israel. Where am I at again? 18, 16 through 40. So let me read that to you. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab. Ahab was the evil king of Israel, of Judah at that time. And Ahab went to meet Elijah. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" "I have not made trouble for Israel," Elijah replied, "but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals." Those are false gods. "Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel. And bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." Jezebel was his wife, the infamous Jezebel. So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal is God, follow him." Make a choice, right? Then Elijah said to them, "I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let them," that would be Baal's prophets, "choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it." So they're going to set up a sacrifice, right? "I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you," that would be you prophets of Baal, "call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God." So we're going to see fire here in a minute. Then all the people said, "What you say is good." So the people said, "Yeah, let's see this. This sounds like it's going to be interesting." Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "Choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the flame of your God, call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire." So they took the bull given them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. So for hours they're calling on Baal. "Oh, Baal, answer us," they shouted. But there was no response. No one answered, and they danced around the altar that they had made. So they're trying to get Baal to send fire down to start this fire. Not happening, right? At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. "Shout louder," he said. "Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought or busy or traveling. Maybe he's sleeping or must be awakened." So they shouted louder, slashed themselves with swords, and appeared and spears, as was their custom, until their own blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come here to me." They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which was in ruins. Elijah took 12 stones, one from each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, "Your name shall be Israel." With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord. We've seen that altar. It's on Mount Carmel. At least it's a replica of that altar. It's probably not the original. And he dug a trench around it, large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, "Fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood." So they do that, right? They're pouring water all over this thing so it won't start on fire. "Do it again," he said, and they did it again. They poured even more water on. "Do it a 3rd time," he ordered, and they did it a 3rd time, more water. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, "O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, So these people will know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood and the stones and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, "The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God." Then Elijah commanded them, "Seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let anyone get away." They seized them, and Elijah had them brought to the Kishon Valley and slaughtered there. So that's the story of heaven, of fire coming down from heaven that we're referring to here, right? So this guy has the ability to bring fire down from heaven. The last time we saw that in the Bible was Elijah back on Mount Carmel. He has the power to do that. On verse 14, we see that he deceives the people of the earth. He tells them to make an image of the first beast. Sounds like idolatry, right? This was the beast who had the fatal wound in his head. Remember that the first beast was murdered, was killed. He had a fatal wound. He presumably was murdered, had a fatal wound in his head. It's a clear violation of the first and second commandments. Let me read that to you from Exodus 20, verses 3 and 4. This is the first and second commandment. "You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for their sins of the father to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments." So Satan is demanding that this new beast set up an idol in the temple. I'm going to talk about the temple in a minute, but demanding that he set up an idol. Bear in mind, Satan's been trying to get us to do idolatry since the dawn of man. Back in the days of Noah and everywhere else, even today, many places in the world, people are doing idolatry. Today, the idols are different. We have people who worship power and people who worship money and other kinds of things rather than pieces of stone. Although we still have people around the world who worship pieces of stone as well. But idolatry is what's going on here. And it's not absolutely clear from the text, but as we'll see later on, presumably the second beast is setting up this image of the first beast in the temple. It says in Daniel that it'll be set up at the temple, and as we'll see in a subsequent verse in a few minutes, it looks like it's happening at the temple in Jerusalem. So the Antichrist is a man of deception. We know that. It says that in 2 Thessalonians, right? The Antichrist is all about deception. So also is this man. He is also all about deception. He is about deceiving people into following idols, into worshiping idols, specifically worshiping the Antichrist, and now even worshiping this idol of the Antichrist, this image, or whatever you want to call it, the statue of the Antichrist. They're scheming to try to get them to worship the beast, and in essence what they're worshiping is what's inside the beast, which is Satan. And it keeps referring to the fact that this beast has a fatal sword wound. So again, understand the fact that this beast was murdered, he was killed, and he came back to life as a result of the Antichrist coming inside of him. So the second beast can now perform miracles. He can call down fire. He can create an image. We're going to see some other things that he's going to do here in a minute. It says that he's going to work hand in hand, basically, with the first beast to deceive the people into worshiping the Antichrist and into worshiping Satan. So the world is going to start beating a path to the door of what used to be the Jewish temple in Jerusalem, what has now been converted into the Antichrist's temple. In other words, during the first half here, it was a Jewish temple that was rebuilt, and now it's going to be the Antichrist's temple, and there's going to be a thing that you have to worship of the Antichrist in there. So in verse 15 now, we see that the Antichrist gives we see that Satan gives this second beast the power to make this image in the temple breathe. So it's breathing, right? It's breathing. Somehow there's smoke coming out of its mouth or something. I don't know what, but it's breathing, and the people can see that it's breathing. So it appears to be alive. It isn't, but it appears to be alive. It also is given the ability to speak. So somehow it can speak. We don't know exactly how this happens, but since there are demons that can do all kinds of interesting things, demons can speak. Remember, Jesus talked to some demons that could speak back to him. We looked at that we looked at that in a previous class. So there are demons that can speak. When Jesus cast these demons out of a man, they went into pigs, but they could still speak. So demons can speak. So we don't know exactly how he's making this image breathe and talk, but presumably there's a demon or demons in there that are making it appear to breathe and making it appear to talk. And Satan is driving this whole thing. So he has set this image up in the temple to basically be an object of worship. So the people can worship the Antichrist even though he's not there, because the Antichrist has other stuff to do. He's got to get out and do other things in the world. He can't be in the temple all the time, which means Satan can't be in the temple all the time. So there are demons that are there that are making this beast do the stuff that it's doing. This beast also has the power to kill people that don't worship it. It says that in the text too, or verse 15. So, perhaps these beasts are given the power to kill people that will not worship this idol. Or perhaps these demons are given the power to kill people. Now in verse 16, we see that this new beast, the beast that we're talking about today, this false prophet, sets up a system where people who worship the beast will get a mark of the beast on either their head or forehead or on their right hand. It's going to identify them to each other, so they'll all know that they're beast people, right? And more importantly, it will identify them to the government at that time. So the government will know who's who. The government will be run by the Antichrist, so the government will know who is already with the beast and who isn't. And the whole idea here is to drive as many people to the beast as possible. So the idea is to make people make a decision for the beast. The Antichrist, the beast, the Antichrist with Satan inside of him, wants people to make a decision to worship him as God. And if they don't worship him as God, then he has the power to kill them. This statue has the power to kill them, and it will do so. So it will kill people who do not worship him. So it's really coming down to be crunch time for people here on earth as we're at the midpoint of the tribulation. We're getting to the point where there's very, very few people left on earth who haven't made a decision. Either they're with Christ or they're with the beast, one or the other. And there are a few exceptions. We've been talking about some of those. We'll talk about some more. But pretty much we're reaching the point where everybody has to make a decision now. And, the government's purpose here is to compel the worship of the beast. Government gets drunk on its own power, and when it does, it compels people to do things that they don't want to do. So as we move into verse 17, we see why the beast uses these marks that it's having people take, marks on their forehead and marks on their right hand. It's using them to restrict them from buying and selling. Well, if you can't buy and sell, you can't run a business, right? You can't own a business. You can't make a living. And if you can't even buy, you can't get food. You can't, it's hard to even survive. You can't do anything if you don't have the mark of the beast on you. So the mark of the beast is, the Antichrist is passing laws here that says that you can't do much of anything if you aren't worshiping the beast. If you haven't committed to worship the beast, there's not much you can be doing in this world. Kind of getting a little like the government's compelling you to worship the beast, right? But bear in mind, what this verse tells us is that by taking the mark of the beast, the people are making the final decision for themselves. They are compelling themselves to eternal damnation. by taking the mark of the beast. This is not something you can come back from. If you take the mark of the beast on your forehead or on your hand, you're done. At that point, you have made the decision to be away from God for the rest of eternity. Now, yes, you'll be able to buy food tomorrow. It's a huge price to pay, and you're making the decision to be away from God for all eternity. But a lot of people say, you know what, I'll deal with eternity some other time. Right now I need food tomorrow. And a lot of people presumably will take the mark of the beast. That's what Satan's trying to accomplish here. He's trying to use this mark of the beast as a way to get people to make the decision to move away from God forever. Now, as we look at this mark, it kind of brings us back to a scene in chapter 7 of Revelation, where God sealed the 144,000 Jewish evangelists with the mark of God. Remember that? He sealed them. These were the Jewish evangelists that went around and converted the world for Christ back in Revelation 7. And they had the mark of God on them. The mark that said that they were the mark of the living, the mark of the living God, it said, and that they were bondservants of the living God. In other words, they had made the commitment, the decision, the final commitment to God. So, in essence, the Antichrist is setting up the counterfeit of that here. You know, the 144,000 got the mark of Christ. We don't know what that was, whether it's a cross on their forehead or whatever. It doesn't actually tell us in the text. But the, excuse me, they got the mark of God. They were God's bondservants by taking that mark. And the Antichrist is now coming up with a counterfeit version of that, a mark. So now we're going to learn what the mark is. In verse 18, John opens that by urging us to use wisdom and understanding. We're going to talk about that in a minute. I'm going to talk about the Jewish numbering system that he's talking about here. To figure out that the number 666 is the mark of the beast, the number of the beast. So let's start with a couple things. First of all, man was created on the sixth day. So 6 is the number of man. 7, by the way, is the number of God. Guess what happened on the seventh day? God rested. This all goes back to Genesis 1 and 2. God created man on the sixth day. He rested on the seventh day. So the number 6 is the number of man, and the number 7 is the number of God. We've all known that for a long time. Now, in Hebrew, when you see 2 6s in a row, that means more of the same thing, or 2 numbers in a row, like 1 1, 2 2, 3 3, 4 4. If you see 6 6, that means more of the same. So a person who has the number 6 6 means he's more of a man, more of a person, of a human being, in other words, less of the image of God. And 666, in other words, 3 of them means the most. So 666 means the most sinful human ever, which is the Antichrist, the beast, the demon. So 666 is the number of the beast. Now, what does that actually mean? And we're told that, and by the way, 666 means it's the most fallen man ever. Remember, man is fallen, that's 1 6. A more fallen man is a 6 6. The most fallen man ever is a 666, and that is the beast, the Antichrist. So that's his number. What does that mean? Where does that number come from? It says in here that we need wisdom and understanding to understand that. So let's look at Hebrew, something a lot of us don't study. What numbers are very significant in Hebrew, way more significant than they are in English. If somebody were to say to you, you're a 728 or an 843 or whatever, we would have no idea what that means in English. It means nothing. In Hebrew, that has a meaning. And that's because the Hebrew letters also have numbers associated with them. Now, the Hebrew letters begin with the letter Aleph, which is our A. And there are 22 of them. So there are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. And the Hebrew letters, each letter, as you go through from the A to Z, that's not Z, but as you go through there, each of the letters has a number associated with it. And those numbers are, A is 1, then there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then the 11th number is 20. Don't try to make sense of it. This is how it is, right? the 12th number, the 13th number, the 14th number, the 15th number, the 16th number, the 17th number, the 18th number, the 19th number is 100. Then the 20th number is 200. The 21st number is 300, and the last number, the 22nd number is 400. So if you take a person's name in Hebrew, I don't know what my name is in Hebrew, but Jesus, for example, is Yeshua in Hebrew. If you take that name and take the letters of that name and figure out the numerical value of each of the letters of that name and add them up, you get a number, which is that person's number. What we know is that so it is the mathematical total of the value of every letter in the name of the person in Hebrew. So what this is telling us is that the Antichrist, this is one way we will be sure to be able to identify the Antichrist. Whatever his name is, we have to translate it into Hebrew. If it's, Joseph, if it's Joseph, it will have a translation into Hebrew. If it's whatever it is, if it's Michael, if it's Robert, whatever, it will have a translation into Hebrew. When we translate it into Hebrew and then take the letters and get all these numbers to match those letters, add all those numbers up, we're going to have a number, a total number for that person's name. And that total number for the Antichrist's name in Hebrew will be 666. It's one of the ways we'll know it's him. That's what it means when it says use wisdom and understanding. What it's talking about, when God gave the Jews the Hebrew lettering system, he also gave them the Hebrew numbering system, which Jewish rabbis use today. They will tell you anything you want. They can take any name in Hebrew and convert it to a number. They can take any word in Hebrew and convert it to a number. So the Antichrist's name will total up to 666 in Hebrew. So it can't just take his name in English. You have to take it in Hebrew and do all this to it. I've kind of gotten way into the weeds on math and whatnot here. Anybody understand what I'm saying?
Oh, it makes sense to me.
Okay, good. I mean, what we're saying is the Hebrew converts each of the 22 letters to a number. And those numbers are not 1 through 22, though. They have these 22 numbers up here. So if you take the person's name and convert it using this, and then add up all of the numerical values of all the letters of the person's name in Hebrew, then you get a number, which is their name, their number in Hebrew. Everybody has a number. Every Jewish person in the world has a number of his name.
So it may not be just the sixth letter of the alphabet, zeta. It may not include that. You're saying the sum total of all the letters of their name.
It will add to 666.
Okay.
Yes, it will add up to 666, that number.
You also have to remember that in the Hebrew alphabet, there are double vowels.
Right.
Right.
So if your name has, like my name is Deborah, you have an E, O, and an A in it, that will not appear in the Hebrew alphabet.
Or even Yahweh, the name of God himself, is the A is not in there and the E is not in there. So the word Yahweh only has 4 letters. The Y, which is a Yod, and H, W, H. It's called the Tetragrammaton, that 4-letter group. So a Hebrew name only has 4. A Hebrew name, even Yahweh, only has 4 letters in it. So my name is Robert, will not have an O or an E. It will only have 4 letters in it. So all of your names, all the vowels are going to be gone from your names. You could do this if you wanted to. You could convert your name into Hebrew, and then you could total up all these numbers and figure out what your number is. Hopefully not 666. And the Antichrist won't be the only person in the world whose name comes up to 666. There will be others. I mean, there are billions of people on the planet. He's not the only one whose name will come to 666. But we will know for sure that it's him when we do that calculation on his number. That's what it means here when it says that you need to use wisdom and understanding to figure out his number. So, okay, now let's move back to Daniel 12 for a moment Daniel 12 tells us that from the time that the regular sacrifice is abolished, that's when the Antichrist goes up to the temple and declares himself to be God, and the abomination of desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. Note the verb there, is set up, okay? It doesn't say it happens once, it says it's set up, so it's ongoing. It's going to happen on a fairly permanent basis. So the abomination of desolation is more than just the Antichrist going up to the temple and saying, I'm God. It's also him setting up this God in the temple, which will be there for 3.5 years. It is set up in the temple. So the abomination of desolation is really two pieces to it. First of all is the Antichrist going up to the temple, and then it's this statue of the Antichrist that breathes and does all this other stuff that's set up for 3.5 years up there. So that's what it means in Daniel 12:11 when it says this abomination of desolation is set up in the temple. It's constructed in the temple. That's this statue that we talked about. So it's going to pretty much continue through the second half of the tribulation. Now I want to talk about something that I'm not teaching today, but you will see it and hear it a lot, and I want you to understand what it is. I don't think there's enough scriptural basis to teach it. It may be true, but I don't think that there's enough scriptural basis to teach it. We have in Christianity a Trinity: Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And this is a Trinity. We call it the Holy Trinity. Now, there are people that teach that what we have just seen with these three people is the unholy Trinity. And I'm going to show you what they teach. What they teach is that you have Satan, the Antichrist, and the false prophet, and that these are the unholy Trinity. So they look kind of like this. The idea behind this is you have the Father, who is, the all overseeing God of heaven. You have the Son, who is worshipped and who is the one who interfaces with us. And you have the Holy Spirit, who leads people to worship the Son. And that is the Holy Trinity that we all know in the Bible as God. The unholy Trinity looks kind of similar. You have Satan, who is now the object of worship, the person who's in charge of everything. The Antichrist, who is the one that people directly worship as the beast. And the false prophet, who's the one who gets people to falsely worship him. And this is called the unholy Trinity. As I said, I'm not teaching that in this class, but I want you to understand it because a lot of people do teach it, and you'll find a lot of people out there who do teach it. You'll see it in a lot of places. It's not that I'm not teaching it because I don't think it's true. It might very well be. It's just I don't think there's enough biblical foundation out there to prove it one way or the other. But it is something that you'll hear a lot about out there as you look at this particular passage in Scripture, that this particular passage might be setting up this false Trinity, this unholy Trinity. So if you see it, you'll know what they're talking about. And you can make your own decision as to whether you think it's correct or not. But that's something that you'll see out there. So that's what we have for this week. Next week, we're going to be going to the last piece of the midpoint. We have one more thing to do next week. And then we're going to begin transitioning. Also next week, we'll begin transitioning into the second half. So we'll begin getting into the second half of the tribulation period. So we've been on the midpoint of the tribulation for like 2 months now. And you probably are wondering, will it ever come to an end? We had the same question with the rapture. We spent about 2 months on the rapture. People were saying, is it ever going to come to an end? And yes, it is finally going to come to an end next week. So, any questions this week before we go? Well, thank you everyone at home for joining us. Thank you everyone here in the class, and we'll see you next week.